Okay, thank you everybody and welcome to this afternoon's event on open source investigations. It's my pleasure to be able to host an event such as this at Queen's on such an evolving and topical area of research. And it's also just so happens that we have two of the experts in the room with us this afternoon. So I'd really like to welcome Dearbhla Minogue, who's a senior lawyer at Global Legal Action Network, which has developed a very new and sort of purpose-built methodology for doing open source investigations and for ensuring that that evidence and that material that is gathered is admissible at trial afterwards. But as many of you know, Dearbhla is also involved here in a collaboration with QUB, and we've got some of our students who are doing that work, where we have an in-house project that is training students in open source methodologies, and maybe is helping inform the work of GLAN, but also perhaps may inform your future work as well. We also have Dr. Brianne McGonigal-Lai, who's visiting us, and I know a number of you in this room have already heard Brianne speak this week. We've been kind of maxing out on the things that we've been able to get you to do. But if you haven't met Brianne, Brianne is from Utrecht, where she heads up their open source investigation lab, which also, in a similar manner to our project here at Queen's, is working and training students to help them identify, verify, and evaluate open source documents related to both human rights and environmental abuses. So we're in for a real treat this afternoon having Dearbhla and Brianne with us. In terms of the plan, I'm going to hand over to Dearbhla first of all, and then Brianne. They're both going to speak for about 10 or 15 minutes each. And then I'd just really be keen to open the floor for conversation and discussion on whether it's best practice, new initiatives, evolving areas of work or potential challenges. Really, that's over to everyone else at that stage. So Dearbhla, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thanks, everyone. It's so nice to be here. Hopefully I'm close enough to the mic. Okay, need to switch this on and off. Okay, so just starting off, introducing Global Legal Action Network. We're a UK-based organisation which also has an office in Galway in Ireland, in the south of Ireland. And we bring cross-border legal actions, usually holding sort of powerful actors to account for human rights violations. And I'm going to talk to you today about our collaboration with the law school here at Queen's. And to give you a bit of background as to how this collaboration came about, for some years now, Global Legal Action Network has been working with the investigative organisation Bellingcat. We began sort of almost by necessity several years ago. Around mid-2017, we were trying to bring some litigation and push for accountability when it came to the involvement of UK weapons in war crimes in Yemen. And we could see that there was a lot of open source information out there. We really wanted to be able to use it in this accountability efforts, but we didn't know how to do it. We also weren't investigators ourselves, so we teamed up with Bellingcat to try and work out how this might be done. We now have a formalized unit, which we call the Justice and Accountability Unit, but that only really formalized just after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Before then, it was just more of a cobbled together kind of effort. So starting off, when we initially began with Bellingcat, we devised this methodology which could assist the investigators to search for and collect information in a way that would render it more likely to be admissible and given due weight in court thereafter. So we wrote this sort of what we thought at the time was like a light touch methodology, and we tested it with a big group of open source investigators and academics in an event in London. And that began what is actually still an ongoing iterative process of refining this methodology, you know, working out how onerous it is, how much does it slow the investigations down, how much do you need to do each individual step. And we're still, I mean, the clinical group is still a very iterative process as well, because obviously you have to balance something that's robust with something that's actually practical. So that was the first step. And so just depicting it visually, you obviously have the investigations in the middle, which is your searching and your verification and your finding the information online. And then the methodology is sort of best thought of as this kind of cushion around it, which kind of captures all the meta information, like what did you search for when you found the piece of content that you're relying on, what did the investigators, what kind of level of education about the legal concepts did they have, where is it all stored, have you recorded all of the other surrounding information, how was it preserved, all of that sort of meta information is the methodology. After having done that event where we sort of tested the methodology, we then wanted to see whether it would actually work when we tested it in the courts of England and Wales. So back in, I think, around 2021, we staged this mock admissibility hearing before Joanna Corner, who's now sitting at the International Criminal Court, but she, at the time, was just still a Crown Court judge. So she did this mock admissibility hearing. All of the proceedings are online and we've done a write-up, but it was very, very interesting because we learned essentially how a court would look at it and also how very experienced prosecution and defence counsel would deal with it. In particular, prosecution and defence counsel who don't necessarily have like subject matter expertise in open source material. So we kind of wanted to test what would go wrong as well as what would go right, because obviously in real life that's how case law is made, is also through things going a bit wrong. So we just sort of threw these lawyers at this problem, and the judge admitted the video in the end, but we learned a lot through various misunderstandings as well. The methodology is now translated into Arabic, Russian and Ukrainian, and it's being used, we're told, by various different institutions and organizations, and we find it very useful for our own investigations that are more kind of court-focused. It's reasonably, I'm told by the investigators, reasonably easy to follow once you know how to use it, but it does take a bit of training on how to use it. We have made a sort of more, how would you say, sort of stripped down version of it for the clinical project here at Queen's. So the methodology involves things like anything from making sure that you are only using a particular device and a particular research account to search for content, so that your kind of the information that the sort of browsers you're using has about you are not being kind of infected by your personal use of the computer that you're on, and these kinds of ways of making sure that your searches are kind of not contaminated by information that these algorithms are collecting. Anything from that to making sure that you're using the right VPN, making sure that you're recording all of your search terms using a browser plugin that we use called Hunchly, all the way to creating different research accounts so that you're not exposing yourself online to, potential threats. So we've created this slightly slimmed down version, but it does hit all the main points that the full methodology needs to hit, including quite a robust vicarious trauma policy, which I think so far has been quite successful, although the students might have comments on that as well. So as I said, Hunchly is a browser plugin that works in Google Chrome, and it essentially just tracks all of your searches and your movements as you're searching for this content, and it leaves you with, a massive sort of file that you can hand over if, for example, you were later asked by a prosecutor who was using the piece of content that you found, or the defense, if they wanted to know, did you conduct an impartial search, or were you only looking for stuff that was going to cement what you already thought happened? You can go back and say, no, I searched in all directions, I was being fair, I was being impartial, I collected everything I needed to retain. All of those things are really helped by this program, Hunchly. So in terms of our workflow at the clinic, we currently have 5 students working in the clinic, and we meet once a week, and we go through individual incidents that need to be geolocated. And again, this is where the iterative process comes in, because this is the first year of the project, and it's been very, very helpful to actually work out what's feasible and give a sort of manageable amount of work, given that this is a kind of a voluntary project. So currently, we are working on what we're calling a kind of a seed data project, which involves, at the moment we're working on the situation in Gaza, but we've done bits of work on other areas of the world, and we sort of have always got various different options on the table for the students in the group. But because of the current conflict in Gaza, we've been working on airstrikes taking place there. The students go through an individual allegation of, say, an airstrike that's taken place on a particular, say, bakery. They switch on their Hunchley file for that particular incident, try and find out what happened, try and geolocate the videos that are appearing online, and then enter some sort of basic information into a spreadsheet about the incident. We're also working with other organizations like GeoConfirmed and Air Wars, where we have access to their data, and we're trying to merge it all into this kind of quite high volume, low detail at the moment data set, which is also being archived by this open source auto archiver project that was developed with Bellingcat as well. So we then, once the incidents have been geolocated and sort of basic information obtained about them, they get entered into a database called Uwazi, which is also an open source database run by the human rights organization Huradox. And it allows us to basically visualize all of this information that we're collecting about the different incidents. So, for example, if you wanted to say how many bakeries have been struck, you can filter the database by that, or how many ambulances. If you want to view all of the content associated with a particular incident, you can view it all side by side. It just makes essentially, audio-visual information quite easy to organize, because obviously if you're working on documents with audio-visual material, they don't really go hand in hand, and it can get a bit out of control. So this is just a screenshot of what the Uwazi database looks like. For example, here's 3. You can see there aren't very many incidents in there so far because it's still a work in progress. But this is a database essentially aimed at organizing as much information about what's happening in Gaza as possible. Taking into account that this would be aimed at international humanitarian law analysis. So this is collecting the content that depicts the attacks, but also collecting any content that would explain whether an attack was lawful or not. So, for example, we gather the content of the attack happening, but also any content that showed like military activity around where the attack happened, any statements that are made by all the parties about the incident, and anything that would help a legal assessor work out whether a crime had taken place, and also then use the evidence for prosecution if it came to that. And this is an example of then how the database could be used to create paper exhibits, because obviously you're still stuck with paper exhibits in court, in a lot of courts, even though the visual media is available. So here we're still using the Uwazi and the spreadsheet IDs, and you can't click on those hyperlinks, but if you did, they would take you to the archived version of the piece of content, so not the online version, because those are quite fleeting and they often can be taken down. So you're left with sort of at the end of the workflow, a sort of paper document that is not going to is not at risk of sort of takedowns, and that information is there forever. So we could file that in a court document, and it would still be there in like 6 years' time, the archived link. And this is an example of an incident that was geolocated by one of the students. It's a society for deaf children in Gaza City, and through this project we found, this is an old picture of the location. Here's a picture of some Israeli soldiers outside the building. I don't know what the lights are in there, but afterwards it's been destroyed. And again, this, like being able to exhibit these like this was only possible from the students' work. So this is just an example of a very concrete way that the clinical project has been very helpful to our work and just quite concrete. That's it from me. Thanks so much, and I'm looking forward to discussing more.